That's it, Jerry. We are live.
So, good morning. I hope everyone can see the screen and we have...
Wait. Go on.
So, good morning. I hope everyone can see the screen and we have some good internet today. We're on the site of the Audacious, which is a super dreadnought battleship, launched during World War I. However, yesterday we also dived the HMT Gestitia, which is another large wreck site off the north coast of Donegal. And what we're doing here is ROV imaging of these wreck sites to analyse and estimate the biohabitat that's down there. And really it's trying to create very high resolution 3D models of these wreck sites, both from laser imagery and also from photogrammetry. So behind us we have the UL, University of Limerick ROV. So this system is a 2,000 meter ROV system. It's a commercial off the shelf, but it is controlled by our software. So we have in-house developed highly advanced navigation and control systems to be able to accurately navigate these shipwreck sites safely and to be able to get good data sets from the laser and photogrammetry imagery. So this is our ROV. What you're looking at here in the center, so this part here is the actual ROV itself, and what it's sitting in is called a tether management system. And we send this tether management system down to depth. So we send this cage with the ROV to depth. So here we're only talking about up to maybe 150 meters in these wreck sites. However, this ROV can go to a full 2,000 meters. So you can see this 2,000 meters cable here on the winch. So when we get to depth, then the ROV flies out from the tether management system, and we have a small excursion of tether up here that we can fly out, and we're neutrally buoyant within the water column. So I'll just show you the cabin that we have. So these are all the ROV pilots and scientists and whatnot. So this is our ROV control shack. These are all our live feeds from the ROV. This is the UL control system. So this is what we call ocean rings, and this is what we developed in-house to be able to accurately control the ROV subsea. So our chief scientist on this cruise is Dr. Chris McGonigal.
How you doing?
So Chris is going to give you a quick introduction on what we're all doing here.
Yep.
And where it's funded from, who's paying for this expedition off the north coast of Donegal.
So yeah, the project is funded by EU Marine Robots, and it's in partnership with, I guess, University of Limerick, Ulster University, and the Scottish Association of Marine Sciences. So we've been able to bring together a group of international expertise in marine robotics to come and actually, for one of the first time in Ireland, to really have a look at assessing shipwreck potential as habitat using this kind of technology. So where ordinarily these structures are really assessed in terms of their archaeological merit, this has given us an opportunity to look at the structural complexity that they provide as a niche for different kinds of organisms, from fish right through to invertebrates. And ordinarily, with the kind of sensors that we've had access to, we've not been able to look at this kind of scale. So this is somewhere between the kind of footage that the tech diving community is able to collect, which is also very useful for us for scientific purposes, but we're able to kind of try and go beyond looking at single points and moving to mapping larger contexts where we've got overlapping imagery. This is really useful for us to understand the kind of ecological processes that are at play on shipwreck sites in general, and then to look at what we can understand from these few sites in the Malin Sea and how that's more broadly applicable to other sites on the Irish Shelf and further afield. So yeah, we wouldn't be able to do this without the kind of the support and the technology and the expertise that we have from UL and from SAMS. So we're hoping that whenever we get through this phase of acquisition into the processing, we're going to be able to reveal some of the complex behaviours and processes that are at play on these sites. Yeah, that's about what we're doing. What else do you reckon, Jared?
Okay, so that's good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to switch over. We have we have Barry McGill, which is a deep water technical diver based in Ireland, and he's online, and he's going to give us an introduction, as well as Thomas Balogh, who is a historian and who has written a book on the HMT Gestitia. So these two guys will give us some historical context on the sites that we visited yesterday and today, and possibly give you some insight as to how the wreck lies today. From there, we'll give you a quick video overview of some of the dives from yesterday and some of the laser imagery scans that we completed. In terms of what we did over the last couple of days, we did a full map in both laser and photogrammetry of the shipwreck site Gestitia. That encompassed 300 lines of, say, 80-meter scans. So we scanned the wreck from south to north, from the propeller side up to the bow. So it's 300 lines, and then we did 4 to 5 lines right along the center of the shipwreck. So from bow to stern. So we'll pass you over then to Barry and Thomas,
Give a couple of seconds,
and they will
just
give
to-
you some insight into the historical. And also we will just live see some of the video that we had. So
Stay
2
with
seconds.
us.
Yep.
Give me a couple of seconds just to connect Barry, and we'll be back.
Okay, hi guys. Good to have you all on with us today. So just to give you a little bit of background on the Gestitia. So Gestitia was one of the largest liners sank in World War One. So I think it's the second largest ship sank in World War One. It was attacked by 2 U-boats on the around the 20th of July 1918. So the sinking itself lasted over about 20 hours from the first attack by UB-64 and then the final attack by UB-124, which caused the final sinking. From a shipwreck diving point of view, it's probably one of the most impressive shipwrecks off the Irish coast, simply because of its size. It's over 280 metres long, so it's one of the most impressive sites from a wreck diving point of view. So on the video at the moment, we're kind of going over the. I think it's probably. Is this near the behind the bridge somewhere?
Yeah, it's running from the bridge section, or from the stern
Back towards the stern. Yeah, so you can see the majority of the shipwreck has collapsed, and it is quite flat on the seabed. But I suppose the main points of interest from a diver's point of view are the bow, which is relatively intact. However, it's collapsed a lot over the last couple of years. And then the stern section is another really impressive section when it comes to features on the wreck. Is Thomas on as well at the moment?
Yes, I am here now. So, as Barry said before, Gestitia is one of the most important wreck in the area of the First Great War. Exactly, it is the 8th largest shipwreck which sunk during the 2 World Wars. Practically, Gestitia, on her original name Statendam, which was built for the Dutch merchant navy, is still the largest Dutch passenger vessel. Called like Dutch Titanic, and not just because of her size. Her story linked with the fate of the unfortunate British liner, and had the same tragic end. Her plans was inspired by the plans of the Titanic's older sister ship, Olympic. Practically, the Statendam and Gestitia was a half-blood sister of the famous Olympic trio, the Olympic, Titanic and Britannic, ex-gigantic. But in a slightly smaller scale, optimized for the shallower Dutch waters. Her hull built exactly on the same way in the Harlem shipyard that the Titanic built a year earlier, while the shipbuilders were working on Titanic's younger sister, the Britannic, on the neighboring slipway. So Johann Georg Reuchlin, a person who ordered her from the Harlem shipyard, father and the master, the director of the owner, the director of the American line, lost his life on the Titanic. He was a special guest on board the Titanic in order to see with her own eyes the perfection of the products of the Harlem. And the Gestitia was requisitioned by the British government as a troop ship and renamed instead of her original Dutch name. All furnitures made by the Dutch company, Matters and Zone, which was the same company who made furnishes for the Titanic, which furnished in Dutch style. So these are the strong connection and interlink between the history of the great ocean liners. There is some significant differences between the two, especially on the arrangements of watertight bulkheads. In case of the Titanic, the bulkheads rose two decks above the waterline. And we have to take into account that Gestitia was the first ship which was built just after the tragic end of the Titanic. So every single connection with the tragedy was incorporated into the hull of Statendam on slipways. This means the watertight bulkhead, the upper end of the watertight bulkhead rose until the first continuous watertight deck instead of in the case of Titanic just only two decks above the waterline, the watertight subdivisions reached. So in case of the Gestitia, however, was required that some level of continuous watertight. In this way, group of the compartments each which only so much water could have the weight of which had not resulted the sinking. That's why the Gestitia was struggling more than 48 hours against the fight with the U-boats. So and final importance of history is that this is the first known occasion that the famous wolf packs, which we are all now from the Second World War, was represented. So instead of canon knowledge, German wolf packs originated from the Second World War. We have to realize that the attack against the Gestitia was the first case in the world. So this is the three major points of the importance of Gestitia history in the history of maritime matters.
So you can see that we're just coming up onto the bridge section now in the video. So as Thomas and Barry were talking, we transitioned from the stern section up past all the boilers, and we're now transitioning up to the bridge. You can see the hull straight in front of you is starting to rise up, and the bridge section goes up maybe 5 to 6 meters or 7 meters on the seabed. And then straight in front of that, to the right-hand side, to the starboard of our ROV, is the main bridge section, or the main bow, which is one of the main points of interest for shipwreck divers on this site.
Yes, so if you can probably see in the video, here, you can see all the holes where the rectangular windows would have been fitted. That's on the starboard side. That's fallen over onto the side. And the interesting thing about these portholes are they're identical that you'll find on Titanic, the legs of Titanic, Thomas mentioned earlier. And just as we can see coming into the view here now is a bulkhead just in front of us, and this would be the bridge area. This would have been the very front of the bridge on the ship. So it's quite an interesting feature from a point of view of diving. Shipwreck because it's relatively intact and around this area, portholes in place, and you can see some of the bridge features as well, which is really interesting from a diver's point of view.
From an ROV perspective, when we meet kind of ships' hulls like this, and there's coming up 7 meters off the seabed, and they have lots of jaggedy things on them. We can't get as close as divers do. We have to keep a safe minimum distance because we're driving an ROV that costs maybe €2 million. So if we get a snag, we don't have a diver that can come down and rescue us. So there's
if you ask very nice, I'm sure we could arrange that.
Very good. So I guess what I want to do now, guys, is maybe give you a look at some of the laser data that we captured on that line. So as we were transitioning up that line, you would have seen the rows of portholes and the rows of deck's hull. A lot of broken hull and a lot of different features that you would have seen. And you can see the laser line as we're transitioning on the ROV. And that laser line captures very high precision data of the shipwreck site. And we can join all of this data up using an inertial navigation system to create a very detailed map of the seabed. And what the University of Ulster will do then, will analyse all of this data, and they will come up with a biohabitat analysis of the wreck site and how these wrecks are being used by organisms to sustain life and to provide shelter from others. Commercial activities such as fishing in the area. So I don't know, have you got your screen there for the... Yeah? Okay.
You're coming up to the biosection now. Looks like
you're using the phone.
Yeah.
Using the phone there.
It's quite interesting on the picture here now. You can see the bow, which is probably the area of the last 18 months. Probably the area that's changed the most. These capstans, you can see the areas where all the white anemones are growing. These were the capstans. You can see the deck is all collapsed around these areas. So it's kind of slid down the shafts on the capstans.
Give us a second here.
Yeah. Well, that's a really interesting point, Barry, actually, is the fact that there's so much soft marine growth on the capstans suggests to us that this elevated position in the water column is providing better feeding opportunities or less kind of interaction from the mobile sediments.
Exactly. And you've quite it's quite exposed there as well from a diving point of view with regard to currents. There's always a strong sea surge there. Even a diver can feel the surge from that point, and you could actually wash from one side of the ship to the other with regard to surge even. And even currents wise, it's quite compared to the rest of the wreck. So you have a massive amount of water passing over that bow section compared to normal.
Interesting is why the pattern of colonization for soft growth is happening. The marine invertebrate communities that are structured, what the physical processes are that are driving that organization. It's a combination of physical, chemical, and biological interactions, which themselves actually explain the progression of the site formation processes from an archaeological point of view. You know, so as the wreck is moving towards a state of equilibrium.
And it's interesting, it's handrail there. You see the handrail there. Just see the handrail is completely covered. Some of the fair leads. And what you'll notice when you dive that the bow is really a concentration area for pollock and any of the fish that are feeding on the wreck. Generally, they tend to congregate in that area as well. Where there's a clean flow of water past the bow section, more so than other parts of the wreck.
It's interesting for us, from an operational point of view, for the ROV team, as well as from a biological interest point. we initially started off surveying with the laser at night because the potential for data quality was much higher. But the lights from the back of the rod were aggregating for plankton, and the plankton were attracting fish. So we were actually ending up with fish causing interference with the sensors. So iteratively we had to switch to day ops for the laser scanning. But it's very interesting because the pollock, the concentrations of pollock around the site, we were able to map those using acoustics overnight from the hull-mounted system and the multi-beam. So we have a very good picture of the density of pollock that we're seeing around the wreck structure. And this again supports the idea that they're providing refugia from fishing pressure, supporting other kinds of habitats. Because out here on the shelf, in the absence of this kind of structure, there's very little refugia, very little potential habitat, and these shipwrecks can effectively become like oases of diversity. And in a way, they're providing almost stepping stones that link up between other invertebrate communities. So this is part of the network kind of analysis of what we're doing.
Yeah, I always find it very interesting. On a shipwreck, and all of a sudden, a large seal swimming beside you on the wreck. Simply for the fact that, you always wonder how does a seal leave the coastline 30 miles offshore, drop down onto a shipwreck, swim around it and feed. It's one of them amazing things that they can basically piggyback on all the shipwrecks around the coast, go that far offshore, basically, and you know, and some seem to be resident out there as well, like the audacious, particularly like seal, that's a resident seal on the wreck, and he seems to have been there for many years. Whereas other wrecks don't tend to have a resident, but certain times of the year they'll have a resident seal, maybe a couple of weeks, or a couple of months, but then you might never see one again on the wreck for years.
Interesting is that in partnership with some of our other collaborators, the Agri-Food Biosciences Institute from Northern Ireland have, through a cooperative project that's involved with marine mammals, we have actually put an acoustic transponder, a passive acoustic monitoring device, out in the proximity of the Gestitia. So we've been listening to the soundscape in the water for a period of about 2 weeks before we arrived, and for a period during our survey, and then 2 weeks after. And then it will be recovered using an acoustic release. So this will give us a picture of how marine mammals, particularly whales and dolphins, cetaceans, are actually potentially using these sites as well.
So what I want to do, guys, is just try and keep some order. Is just to introduce you to some of the laser scans that we've been capturing, and then we're going to move from there to the live dive on the Audacious. So I know we're going to run out of time if we don't keep together. So you showing the laser scan there, Peter? So these are the laser scans, Thomas and Barry, that you wouldn't have seen these, but this is the stern section there. You can see the top of the rudder there on the left hand side, and some of the tangled mess of the ship's hull afterwards at a high point. You can actually denote some of the ropes coming off the shipwreck. There's two ropes coming off, one loop to the right hand side and one straight up rope on the top of the rudder itself. So it's
a little bit dark. I always see a little bit dark. Wavy line on the blue wavy line on the screen at the moment.
I think, guys, it's a very important work regarding that. This is exactly what Robert Ballard 20 years ago exposed like undersea virtual museum, and because I think it is extremely important is that the currents that you mentioned earlier, for example, swept the superstructure of the left side of the ship, in the case of Gestitia, and today only parts of the hull, the former waterline, remain more or less intact, especially in the bridge area and the bow section. Everything else is broken into small pieces, turning the magnificent ocean liner jigsaw puzzle, as we can see on the monitor. So I think it is very, very important work what you have done. With respect to the phases of passing away the four contemporary ocean liners, the Titanic, the Lusitania, the Britannic, and the Gestitia are in different stages of the final decay. These different stages, Gestitia is one of the most deteriorated wreck just after the Lusitania. So I think it is very, very important work in order to gain a more or less exact or totally exact picture of this huge wreck site on the jigsaw puzzle of the remainings of Gestitia. Thank you. It's amazing what you have done.
Scan that you guys can see the detail there, eh? It's just to do with the cameras that we're not set up for that screen.
Yeah, but maybe what we could do as well is do a live stream when you're back on the first stage, and we can kind of go down and maybe do an hour or so on the footage process as well.
We actually have a coffee morning for this talk, maybe at the end of this month coming. So in 3 weeks' time, we will have a talk from Chris McGonigal here. He's going to tell us everything that he learned on this extraordinary cruise funded under EUMR. Eh? So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to prep the ROV. We're going to give you some live streams of the ROV, and we should be in the water maybe in about 5 to 10 minutes time, if that suits. And maybe you guys, Barry, you can give us some introduction then to the new wreck site, which is HMS Audacious.
Just give me there 2 seconds, and we'll do something on that.
And just to thank you guys for coming on. It's very interesting, and the wealth of knowledge that you have on these wreck sites really helps to give context to these in a historical and a diving context. It's really good. So if you're on the stream, just stay with us for a couple of minutes. We'll get set up and we'll get in the water, and Barry and Thomas will get set up and hopefully be able to give us some context on the new site. So
do you want Jared, do you want me to file share just with a little bit on the Gestitia?
Do you want to share a screen? Can you share a screen?
I can probably share.
We can get you to share a screen there, Barry, and you can give us an introduction. Yeah, it would be great.
Yeah, give me a second. Audacious.
And he's going to share his screen for Audacious.
Yeah, that's fine. Give me just a few seconds.
You
can start sharing there, so I can see it, and then I'll put you in this.
Can you put in a little video of us launching? Over.
I can, but I just need to some time.
Yeah. There's time. We have time.
Yeah. One of the other things that's quite interesting, actually, from an ecological point of view, is that if we imagine the thing about the Great Wars, that we have a reasonably uniform period of introduction into marine systems. So if you imagine that, just like Tomas was saying, that the range of different energetic conditions, biological conditions, and chemical conditions where these wrecks have been deposited will give us some indication of how quickly or how slowly the sites may return to an equilibrium. And we've already seen that compared to some of the work we've done previously in the Irish Sea, where it's a very different dynamic environment, and there's much more sedimentation and much more introduction of nutrients as compared to out here in the shelf waters. These waters are really clean, really clear, and there's very little organics, but they're very strong physical processes that you can see reflected in the sediment environment around the wreck structures themselves. So we can imagine that in sites that are dominated by physical processes, the structural degradation of the site will happen in a much more rapid manner, and there's a very strong depth related component to that as well. So out here, where we have been in 65 to 85 meters of water, where we can potentially have interaction with the wave base during very large episodic storm events, compared to lower energy environments where it's more tidally dominated, that's going to actually cause differences as well. And we can see evidence of the tidal phase in the geophysical signatures around the wreck structures, where we have large scar features and depositional features on opposite sides of the wreck structure. But all this stuff gives us a really interesting insight into how the sites evolve, how they're colonized, is another aspect of that it warrants further exploration.
Okay, we're ready here. So, Larry, whenever you're ready,
USBL on.
we can kick in.
Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background on the Audacious. 1 second there. So basically, on the Audacious itself, the Audacious was leaving Loch Swilly. So you can see on my screen here where my cursor is. This is Loch Swilly. To the right of my cursor, here's Malin Head, we all associate with shipwreck diving, and all these red dots are basically known shipwrecks around Irish, and you can see there's a massive concentration here coming into here in our channel. And during Both World War I and World War II, this would have been a major shipping route into Great Britain. Into the Clyde and the main areas the convoys would have been travelling. Now to begin the World War I, the Grand Fleet Navy were stationed here, Loch Swilly. It was probably considered to be one of the safest harbours in Britain at the time. So it gave basically shelter and it was a long way from basically the front and English Channel or so. It was probably considered to be safe. Unbeknownst to the British Admiralty, a German armed merchant called the SMS Berlin had travelled into North Channel. Was trying to lay a minefield on the way into the Clyde. Now, there was a lot of traffic, radio traffic at the time. So the captain decided not to proceed with the Clyde, and he decided to lay a minefield just north of the Irish coast, off the Donegal. And it was an interesting thing with regard to Berlin. The reason they picked Berlin was Berlin looked very similar to another ship, British ship called the Calgarian. Later actually sank off the north coast of Antrim. Just 2
seconds there, Barry. We're just going to launch, okay? Santo, you're good to go off there. 2 seconds, man. Trying to do an operation here as well, eh? Bridge RV, Quebec.
That's all fun and games.
We're going off deck there. Thank you. Go ahead, Barry. So you can see us launching on the other screen as well, eh?
Okay, perfect. So suppose the interesting thing was that there was a minefield laid on the 22nd of October 1914. Quite a large 200 miles over a 10-mile area. A victim then, so basically there was another ship called the Manchester Commerce that sank in 7 minutes, and some of the 30 men were picked up, 14 died in the sinking. But the interesting thing was that there was no distress call. So when it was picked up by the trawler, the survivors, they couldn't radio or they couldn't contact land. So as they were bringing the men ashore, the Grand Fleet, or the second battle squadron of the Grand Fleet, were leaving basically the Sound of Mull in Scotland, and they were going on exercises off the north coast of Donegal. So this is the Audacious. Then you can see on the screen, I think at the moment. That screen sharing Audacious or we still on the seabed mapping screen?
We're still on the seabed mapping.
Alright.
I think maybe you have the wrong screen shared, maybe, Barry.
I don't think so. One second here. Alright.
It's not on presentation view, is it?
I'm not in presentation view anyway, so...
Until very find the picture, it's an interesting connection between the Audacious and the ocean liners regarding the rescue ship which was on the scene. It's the Olympic on her way to the United States of America. So the Olympic was the first rescue ship on the scene. The Audacious rather on the mine.
Are you getting it there now?
We have the Audacious.
Yeah.
We have the battleship.
And can you see it? Yeah, perfect. And can you see it? So basically, this is a picture of the Audacious now. So you can see it was. So you can see at the time, probably at the time, or the battleship's time, King George's time, it was a dreadnought battleship. Newly built. It was newly built at the beginning of World War II, and at the beginning of World War II, and it was World War One. The other side of it is, the other side of the point of view of from a point naval might or naval time, dreadnought battles to be dreadnought battles invincible statements basically both the British and the Germans were trying to win the war at sea, and it was a massive controversy at the time. Controversy had covered up was the fact that some very low tech mines caused like the ship striking one mine. So as part of the so you can see here, pictures. You can see here the screen change there to as your screen changed there to a picture of a blimp above it. So you can see here, like launch 1913, give you an idea of the gun crew. A picture of the gun crew was taken on the line 20th of July in Kiel. And it was actually at a gunnery competition. And the crew of the Audacious basically won a gunnery prize. I suppose it gives you a context of terms that were right up at the very beginning of World War I. And the other thing, a picture of the Audacious with a German background. It basically was the spacecraft began time. These ships were basically the pinnacle of human engineering at the time. So can it go on about the sinking? I'll turn down. Sorry. Is that better there now? Perfect. So you can see here a picture of this is kind of quite a famous picture of the sinking. So the nice thing is that nobody died on the ship. The ship sank. The whole crew were able to abandon. And they tried to tow it to land. But over time, the ship became too heavy to tow. It parted its tow lines a number of times, and in the end, basically, they had to give up on the ship, and all crew were able to evacuate the ship. One person did die in the sinking, and that was a person that was on a nearby ship to Liverpool. So there was loads of ships around, as you can see from the picture. And basically, the Liverpool was nearly a mile away. And as the Audacious sank, it turned over and went upside down. And then there was a massive explosion around from the cordite and either A turret or B turret. Nobody's really sure what exact turret exploded. But basically, if you consider a dreadnought battleship, the turrets were at the top, at the deck, and then below that was the cordite, and then below that again, at the bottom of the ship, were all the projectiles, all the heavy projectiles. And these projectiles are over a half a ton in weight each. They're over 600 kilos in weight. So when the ship turned upside down, the heaviest projectiles would have fallen through the decks, would have crashed into the cordite section, which would have been above it, which turned out to be below. And as the projectiles crashed into the cordite, a spark happened, and then you had a massive cordite explosion, which basically blew the entire front half of the ship to pieces. And what we find on the seabed today is we get a very intact upside down shipwreck up to the bridge area, and from around B turret or behind B turret forward is completely wreckage. There's very little actually left other than shards of wreckage. And then there's a small section of the bow just remaining off to the side. So from a dive, it's a really interesting shipwreck from a point of view of, so you can see here there's a multi-beam taken a couple of years ago. So this is the brake section where the explosion would be. This green area here is the 13.5-inch gun from either A turret or B turret. And this beside it here is the empty barbette. So this gun here would have actually sat inside this barbette turret. And you can see off to the right of the screen here, the bow section are collapsing down near the seabed. So from a wreck point of view, so this would be your stern, to give you an idea, upside down. And the interesting thing on the stern would be the stern torpedo tube. And then this would be the stern area with the propellers. Really interesting from a diver's point of view, because the wreck is disintegrating quite quickly now, so we can penetrate the wreck, and a lot of the internals are becoming exposed as the external hull plate is disappearing over time. And then I suppose the main feature then would be the guns, the 13.5-inch guns near the break at the front. That's kind of a general overview.
Yeah, go on.
That's great, Barry. Thanks very much for that. You can see the main camera there from the ROV, I guess, in the top left-hand corner. So this is our low light camera that sits out the front of the sub, and then we have 7 or 8 different cameras and payloads on the ROV. But the middle one there is our HD camera, so that does 4K video, and we do some of our very nice imagery off that. Our low light camera, which is on the left, is basically our main navigation camera. We get very good visibility and orientation and navigation from that camera. And then the reverse camera is on the right hand side, and I wanted to show you that because you'll see when we exit the TMS and we start moving down towards the seabed, we have the TMS sitting about 30 meters altitude at the moment. So it's just sitting up off the seabed. And then we're going to exit the seabed and move down towards that bow section. We're hoping we're on site on B turret, the main turret that's on the seabed. And we're hoping that our navigation is good. This is our first dive to this site, so there's a little bit of risk that maybe we have our coordinate system upside down and we're not going to be on the turret. But we'll dive and we'll see where we are, and we have Barry and Thomas really to tell us and navigate us if we get lost, eh?
Yeah, hopefully.
So we'll switch over there and we'll start diving, guys. So if you want to come in, Barry and Thomas, if you want to talk over the video as we're driving along, and you can keep giving us that historical and diving context, it's really good. So
Perfect. Yeah, I'm just going to try, Jared, to find out. Can I see your live feed from the screen on the Skype call? Can
Sure.
you? Sure.
Give me a second there. I'm not sure. Oh yeah. Yep, there you go.
Yeah, perfect.
It's not in big resolution, but I hope you can see very approximately.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I can work off that.
Happy?
yeah, so we're gonna exit there, guys.
How long does it take for you to get from the surface down to the shipwreck?
2 to 3 minutes, Barry. Same as you hauling down the shot line, eh?
It depends if you're in front of me with a scooter or not.
Yeah.
You're getting really good conditions, it looks like, up there. At least you're getting a perfect weather for it.
Weather's been nice to us, thank God. It's we're meant to be transitioning down on Sunday evening, on Monday. So we'll be transitioning down the coast back to Galway on Sunday and Monday, and we're meant to hit hard weather there. So I don't think I'll be able to get a flight home. So I'm gonna have to suffer through the bad weather on the way home, eh?
You can't be paying enough money, Jer. Are you going to the Empress as well, or is it just
It's just these two, Barry. I think we've done a lot of we have an AUV on board as well from Sam's, so they've done quite a few dives as well, doing multi-beam scans, and we've done a lot of bait traps and fishing and trying to understand the fish species in the area and numbers of species and whatnot.
Interesting.
So we've done there's multiple operations on at the same time.
You've been kept busy, so. And visibility-wise, what have you been getting up there? Have you been getting kind of 20, 30 meter visibility, or has it been better?
It's been 20 to 30, yeah. It's been quite good.
I've heard there's a big plankton bloom now on the west coast, so hopefully it doesn't get too bad up on the north coast as well.
Very good. So we're trying to get back online here. The thrusters weren't spinning, so it's always the problem with ROV operations. Sometimes you have an error, so you have to clear that error.
Yeah, it does. ROVs and Facebook Live don't really go together very well.
So we're just gonna have to do a reboot there and come back up and restart, guys. We haven't done much of this in terms of having failures. It's just it's a bad look when.
If you want, if you're waiting, if you want, I'll stick up a couple of photographs.
Yeah, work away there, Barry. Yeah, we're gonna be another 5 minutes because we have to come back up. We have to reset our INS system and then we have to go again. I think this only happened once to us the whole week, so this is the second time and it's when you go live, eh?
Yeah, give me a second, just Barry, to set you up. Yeah, just turn around the 200 units. I'll bring up the software. Okay. That's you, yeah.
We'll have to get you back, Thomas, soon to do some more stuff up in Donegal.
It is a very interesting corner of the world because you mentioned this was a very intensive traffic of the merchant shipping in both Great Wars. So this means that this kind of place of the world is a very unique place regarding the wreck diving and the researching activity on the shipwreck and wreck sites, different wreck sites. So we have a very unique atmosphere to see how the shipwrecks deteriorated during the centuries in different stages, and which is more important.
Thomas, just 1 second, Thomas. Can you turn your volume to 0 when you're talking, please? Sorry.
Okay. Okay, it is good now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think it is a very unique place for the wreck diving because it's so many wrecks in a small place. We have a good occasion to make a combination process in each process regarding the deterioration because the wrecks are in different stages of this deterioration because of age. So we have a very interesting opportunity to see how the shipwrecks deteriorating and gone. This wreck diving activity is very, very important to see how this decomposition of the shipwrecks have to be done.
Yeah, it's
Thinking about as well is that the technical diving community are providing here a really interesting window for something that can become like a citizen science. So if there's better coordination between the tech diving community, the archaeological community, and then even ecologists who are interested in how wreck structures behave, because a lot of this can be viewed much the same as artificial reefs, and a lot of the ecological understanding that we have about marine renewable energy structures in the future can be informed by our understanding of how these processes are affecting large structures such as these. So it can give us a really interesting analogue for how any kind of an object might behave if it's put on a seabed for 100 years. So this is like a natural experiment from an ecological point of view. And even like you were saying there, Tomasz, the orientation that the wreck comes to rest on the seabed is quite a random process, and relative to the background energetics of the condition, even the fact that Audacious has landed upside down is presenting a very different hydrodynamic structure to the energetics in the system, as compared to something that maybe is lying in a different orientation. And something as random as that can have a profound impact on how quickly the site may be exposed. But it's very interesting.
It's even interesting. You know, with the audacious, we would refer to as a wreck fog. The way the tide runs in the audacious, it runs through the wreck, and you end up getting a very rusty cloud on one end or the other, depending on the direction of the tide.
Yeah.
If you dive on an ebbing tide, one section of the wreck will be cloudy, 2 meter visibility, and the other side of the wreck, the impellers, it might be 30 meter visibility and it's completely clear. And then if you come back 6 hours later, the stern section has very good visibility, and the guns are very clear. And what you're getting is basically all this kind of silt, but also coming from inside the wreck, and outside the wreck. So it's like a fog. You don't get it around the wreck. You don't get it on the initial wreck around Donegal, but because the Audacious is turned upside down and it's quite intact, but it's also quite open. It's like a big filter now. You're getting a massive amount of turbidity in the water. Which it's orange in colour, so it's probably a rust, but there's probably a lot of organic matter in it as well.
That's a really interesting thing. If you imagine like an analogy that once the structure comes to a point of failure where it becomes critically exposed to the conditions, the degradation might be very rapid, you know. But it's like
and we've seen a massive amount of degradation in the hull, especially below the armour plating, in the last 10 years. Like it's when I dived at first, say back in 2005, you couldn't really dive the top because all it was hull plating and the keel. Whereas now it's pretty much all the hull plating is gone on the bottom of the ship. It's completely exposed the underside of the engine room and the boilers, which from a diver's point of view is good, but the wreck integrity has completely collapsed really over the last 10-15 years.
A good analogy for this is like it's something that we would see in terrestrial ecology in dune grassland systems, where you have a rabbit burrow, right, where a rabbit is burrowing and it basically breaks through the vegetation. Then the wind processes can exacerbate that and it becomes like a blowout. So, you know, in a way, these kinds of issues can be much the same on a shipwreck, where exploiting a structural failure or some design feature like a porthole or anything like that actually allows the current to kind of start to penetrate the structure and potentially cause more impact thereafter. But it's a very interesting thing from a physical processes point of view, you know.
Yes, because shipwrecks has also have an own evolution, a bit like a degradation of a human body after the burial. Remaining is nothing but the skeleton when the flesh and the skin disappears. Now getting more and more conspicuous how the frames are becoming uncovered as the side plates peeled off from the Gestitias or the Audacious hulls. So even those parts of the hull has more or less preserved its original ship shape so far. So I think this disappearing of the certain shipwrecks as a could be demonstrated on the most important and the most visible way as a result of your work as a divers, as a researcher as well. So thank you for both of all.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I'd love to get to talk to you more, Thomas. It sounds very interesting as well.
And like the Audacious is probably one of the best from a point of view of crustaceans. Like, you know, on the Audacious as a wreck site, like you can, I don't know if you can see my screen there. There's a picture of the guns.
Give me a second.
Yeah, but like on the Audacious, like you can come across loads of lobsters, loads of ling, and even octopus would be quite frequently seen on the wreck. And then you've also got like a resident seal on the wreck most years. So like from a point of view of habitat, it's probably one of the most unique wrecks because it's so intact, and because it turned upside down, it's quite strong. It's held its shape. And because the ship is kind of surrounded in a very thick armour plating, it hasn't collapsed onto the seabed like the Audacious or the Gestitia, which fell to the side. it's quite compact on the wreck. So generally what's happened with the Audacious is you've got this ring of armor plating around the seabed, and everything has fallen inside. It's like collapsed inwards inside. It basically two very defined lines on the port and starboard. The armor plating is vertical on the seabed, and you've very little wreckage outside of the armor plating, and the majority of the wreckage is inside. And you get a massive amount of shelter from that because the tide hits it, and then the tide can't go through it, so it tends to try to go around the wreck. So even from a point of view of, I suppose, habitats, you have a massive flow of water around the wreck and through the wreck, which probably helps with regard to crustaceans and the wreck.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things about it from the organism point of view is that if you imagine the shelf seas in Malin are largely gravels. They're largely gravels that have a degree of mobility, and it doesn't take very much mobility for a particle to inhibit fouling or any kind of growth on it. And if you'll notice that quite readily is that a lot of the gravels seem very clean and very bare, or devoid of much organics. But as soon as you get onto the structure, it provides a solid point of attachment for any of the invertebrate larvae that are in the water, and that's why in these sites, if the organism can hold on, it presents very strong feeding opportunities because there's a lot of material in the water column. The problem is there's very little substrate for things to attach to, and the substrate, the particle sizes are so large that nothing can really burrow into it. So the only kinds of organisms that you're likely to see in these sites are large, mobile megafauna, like crabs and fish and things like this.
Copy that. So just to give you an update on ROV operations, so when we come up, we have to realign our inertial navigation system. That takes 5 minutes on the surface, so that's over now, and we're ready to go again. So we're going to go back down, and hopefully it won't crop itself this time, eh? Hopefully we'll get out of the latches.
I think it'd be much easier, Jared, to strap a scooter on and go down yourself.
It's a little less risky. Yeah.
And one other thing to think about is that in terms of the time scale of shipwreck, in terms of that shipwrecks as ephemeral features on the shelf sea, they are basically kind of on the same sort of time scale as a whale fall. Maybe like up to 100, 200, 300 years, and then they'll have basically, depending on the energetics, they might have returned back to stasis. But in that space of time, there could be the introduction of another structure similar within a certain radius. And if you were to take a large-scale analysis of shipwrecks and their introduction across the wider picture, they can provide a really important network of potential habitats for organisms to exploit. So it's almost as if the diversity of potential habitat inside a wreck structure itself is it just adds so much more richness to this picture.
Yeah, I think what you'll notice as well up in Donegal in particular that there's very little wreck or net fishing on the wreck, or very little trawling on the wrecks. So generally all you're going to find is lobster pots, which again aren't that destructive relatively compared to trawl fishing. Whereas if you go down to the south coast, the amount of nets on the shipwrecks on the south coast of Ireland are, every shipwreck is covered in them. Whereas up in Donegal, other than the odd U-boat, you do see very, very little wreck snag or net snagging on the wrecks, which kind of means that I suppose they're not damaged from an environmental point of view from fishing as much as what you would find on other areas like the south coast. It just depends on I suppose the type of fishing that's undertaken in the area.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen that. It's very common in the North Sea, in the southern North Sea. There's lots of interaction between fishing vessels and shipwrecks that are really can speed up the degradation rapidly.
I am.
Okay, so we're coming out of the TMS there. You can see it in a reverse camera there, yeah?
Yeah, I can't see anything on the Skype call at the moment.
We're coming up.
See it now.
Oh yeah.
So that's our TMS and that's our exit. You can see our tether that comes out from that. And what we're going to do now is we're on manual pilot to get it out. So we're manually flying that on a stick and a joystick. And what we're going to do now is switch over to the automatic system. And we get much more control and dexterity and navigation from the automatic system, the ocean rings that we developed in-house. So switch over there, lads.
Ready, Peter? Yeah. Pick it up.
And so we're on automatic, and now we're going to come down to the seabed.
Okay. Move that down. Small steps. Straight down, yeah.
Bring it in around 45. We should see them.
Heading 45 degrees.
Yeah. Just going to tighten up in the tether now as well, alright?
Yeah.
So keep going down, you keep going down.
So hopefully a wreck starts to appear, eh?
You keep going down, yeah.
Hopefully.
Altitude is 50 meters.
Hopefully you're at the right wreck site now.
Got a visual dead ahead. Stand by.
Yeah.
Come down
So it
slowly.
seems our navigation is good, eh?
Come down slowly.
Yeah, you're right on the turret there, on the gun turret. Looks like. You're nearly as good as Michael's shot
yeah.
line.
Do you want to swap to HD, Jer, maybe? There.
HD's. Yeah, and color cop. HD is good there, yeah. And the city's very good there.
So you can see on the right in front of you there, I think, is the 13.5-inch
There's
gun
a bit of
turret.
rope there.
Yeah.
Maybe go to white.
Yeah, there's probably a couple of left shot lines left there, I'd say. And you can kind of see these. This would be either A turret or B turret. There's a kind of an open debate on what turret it is. To the left of that circular kind of mass is the counterweight. So this would have been at the back of the gun. And then to the right of that round circle would be the guns themselves. So if you were to kind of go around to the right, you'll start seeing the two 13.5-inch turrets or gun barrels on the turret.
Do you want me to come in closer a bit? Or down? We are at 10 meters altitude.
Yeah, if you were to pan around to the right and drop down a little bit, there's no wreckage out to your right. It's quite open to your right.
And you can see the two barrels, I guess, there, Barry.
Yeah, you can start seeing the two barrels right there. So the turret itself is upside down, and you can see like on the turret itself, it's quite interesting because you can see a lot of the projectiles would have landed on the turret or around the turret during the explosion. So what would have happened in the sinking would have been that these turrets would have actually fallen out of the barbette before the explosion. So these are only held in by gravity, and when the ship turns upside down, the guns normally fell to the seabed before the ship sank. So this turret would have hit the seabed before the explosion. So when the ship turned over, the turret would have slipped out of its barbette and would have just hit the seabed. And then after that, the explosion would have happened, and the ship would have sank around it. So that's why the majority of our turrets we can't see because they're still stuck underneath the wreck. But because the explosion, the wreck or the ship would have disintegrated before it landed on the seabed in this area. So that's why we can kind of see an exposed gun.
Want to go down a bit?
Just look down the barrel. Around this way, look down the barrel. So that way, right turn left.
Okay.
I think the black and white worked quite well actually.
I think we're switching
Turn
back.
up. Yeah.
So that way, right turn left. Yeah, I give it to you. Just that way, right.
I don't want to
Look down the barrel.
I can look down.
You can do that. Come
Ah,
down.
like that. Okay.
That way, right.
So there's normally some lobsters live in the barrel, Barry, eh?
Yeah, the right barrel there normally has a lobster resident, and if you get really close to that barrel, you won't be able to ROV. But it's even interesting that you can see the machining on the inside of the barrel. So the inside of the barrel is rifled. So there's actually a machining done on the inside of the barrel to help the projectile spin as it's being launched. And the other interesting thing about these guns is the way they were made was very time consuming and a very high skilled process to basically make these gun barrels out of the steel. And the speed of production of dreadnought battleships was controlled by how quickly they could make these guns. And it's very hard to get a sense of scale here, but the guns themselves are probably, you know, a human head could fit inside the gun barrel. Like they're quite impressive feats of engineering just to make these barrels in general, and especially when you get close to them and you can see the machining on the inside, like the rifling and stuff. It's really interesting from a point of view of the technology at the time and how these processes had to be made.
Do you want to try to zoom in, Jordan? Maybe?
Come down.
Go down a bit.
Now focus, you know. And now, you see the barrels of my lowest count, this one, lowest count.
Yeah, that's okay.
So we'll come up and we'll just, what we're going to do is just capture some laser data over the barrel there.
Yeah.
You know, and then we can have a look at that after in the post process.
Just give me a second. Yeah, you do.
And you can see in terms of ROV operations, we're generally looking at this screen here and looking at our tether coming in on the left to make sure that our tether isn't snagging on any of the wreck features. Because if it snags, then we're in trouble. That is our lifeline effectively. If we lose that communications, our power, we're looking at a salvage team or something to come out here to rescue ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah, you're pretty good on that side. Actually, on the side you're on the turret, there's very little wreckage. If you were on the other side, it would be much more congested with wreckage from the main shipwreck. So it looks quite good there, actually, from a tether point of view.
Alright.
Well, the barrels themselves are really interesting. Even from a diver's point of view, you can swim inside that turret. You can actually climb into the turret and get to the back of the breeches. And the size of the breeches are probably, you know, they're probably over 2 meters in diameter when they get back to the back of the breeches. So they're really impressive guns. And even inside the turret itself, you can see the voice pipes and the controls, the wheels for controlling the elevation of the guns. And you can also see some of the controls inside for the turret, for moving the turret. So I suppose it's scary to think that people would have worked inside the turret as well, because it's quite a small cramped space. And as we move up here to the main turret, you can see there's kind of holes in the turret. And the interesting thing about that is some of them are corroded holes, but you'll actually find there's one or two in front of us here that have like a square top and a round bottom, and these would be hatchways that the men would use to get into the turret from the counterweight as it rotated on the deck. So it's kind of interesting sometimes when you can see these features of how people have to climb into these pieces of machinery to operate them. So the two bottom holes there, as you can see, are actually access hatches for the men. And in the top one is actually just corrosion, but the bottom two were access hatchways. And you can see a lot of wreckage on the top as well from that collapsed onto the turret as the ship exploded.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting stuff up there when you kind of dig through it.
So you can see what we're doing is we're moving across at a specific speed and a specific heading to try and get good data set for that laser. So if we have, you know, a constant speed, constant heading, and, you know, navigation side, waypoints and whatnot, we can get a very high detail accurate model of the gun turret itself, you know.
And the other thing that's interesting to add is that for the invertebrate life that's on the wreck structure, so not just the laser will give a very good rendition of the morphology, so the shape of the features, but also the intensity of the laser energy returning back to the sensor can be used to differentiate between things that are living and things that are not. So the spectral response of the sponges and the anemones and things like this will show up as a different kind of return. So it's another way that we can isolate those signatures from our data. But you can see it.
You can see a hole that the laser just passed over, just after passing over. That actually is the counterweight. That's actually the hatchway sometimes when you're as a diver and you look into that hole, you kind of, the diver can't fit through it. Like it's quite a small space to climb into. And that was one of the access hatches basically as well for
Get that down.
Better level left.
for
Come down a bit. We're just coming up on that gun on top of that platform there, Barry.
yeah, there should be 2 or 3 guns there in front of you, some of the 6-inch guns.
Yeah.
So there's one there just right in the center of the screen. And actually if you move around to the left, you'll actually see another gun that's actually the barrel has been bent from the heat of the explosion, which is always an interesting feature. So I think there was 16 of these smaller guns on the wreck, 6-inch guns. It's one of the nicest things as a diver to do, kind of swim around the wreck and try to find them all. I always find it's kind of the challenge to try to find all 16 of them.
You want me to fly over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're gonna scan this gun as well, just with the laser system.
Perfect. I think there's 2 more guns within that circular barbette. There's 2 more guns within it in the wreckage. One clear you can see.
So what we're doing, we're always scanning for ropes or any dangers that might kill us.
Or cost you millions of euros.
That's it, Barry. Yeah, it's a bit more risky than diving, eh? Well, financially, not health-wise. There's the cannon on the left-hand side that's bent over.
Yeah,
The
so you
6
can see
inch.
it there, and like
Yeah.
the interesting thing from that from a diving point of view is like the heat to bend a gun barrel must be severe, and or then to bend over when it landed on the wreck, you know, it must have. It's impressive that it didn't break, I suppose, and the heat involved to make it bend. And you can see just in front of you here now the boilers, these round circles that are just kind of in the middle of the screen. They're the Yarrow boilers. Just to the left and in front of you there are Yarrow boilers. Or the boiler room.
We're just trying to navigate here as well, because it's our first time on this shipwreck, you know. So
Yeah, I think they look like the boilers.
Coming back.
yeah. So we're gonna do a 180 there and catch the other side of that gun and the main turret B as well.
And if you have to think about it from a technology point of view, like that, at the time within the World War I, like Yarrow boilers were probably one of the most, they were way above the efficiency when it came to the typical Scotch boiler you got on ships at the time. So, Audacious had some of the most advanced technologies available when it was built. And sometimes you kind of forget that when you look at dreadnought battleships, that they look old and kind of historic now to us, but at the time they were really advanced pieces of engineering.
And I guess just to go back to the historical for Audacious, there was some American liner passed at the time, and there was some internment or something, was there?
Yeah, the Olympic I think was on site when it, and there was photographs taken from the Olympic of the sinking.
And the British tried to hide the fact that it was sunk.
Yeah, they actually even made up a mock-up ship, and they built they took a ship and they built wooden turrets on it and tried to make it look like it was the Audacious, and it wasn't actually publicly announced about the sinking until after the war, because it was a massive embarrassment that I suppose the most advanced ship in their fleet had sunk before the war really had even started.
And
it was even worse that it sank in a minefield, because again, if Audacious hadn't sank in this minefield, it would have been part of the Battle of Jutland. And it would have been one of the main ships in the Battle of Jutland if it had got there, but it never actually seen combat.
So it was a huge loss for the Allies, I guess.
Yeah, I think it was at that point in the war, it was the first major casualty, and I think it was from a point of view of Whitehall and the British Admiralty, it was definitely an embarrassment more than anything.
And the U-boat captain that actually managed to set up the minefield and actually to claim this.
The ship, the liner, the Berlin, the liner.
Oh, the Berlin, sorry. But there was, he went back to Germany disgraced or something, did he?
Yeah, so the Berlin basically left North Coast of Ireland and they went up around Norway, so they were captured off the coast of Norway, and they were basically imprisoned up in Norway, and basically he was considered a coward in Germany because his plan was, or his orders were, to set a minefield in the Clyde, and because he didn't fulfill his orders, the Germans considered it to be an act of cowardice that he chickened out of basically laying the minefield in the Clyde. But effectively, it's probably one of the most effective minefields ever laid. There's the Vickner was sank in the same minefield. Manchester Commerce was sank in the minefield, and there's definitely 4 or 5 other shipwrecks in that minefield that were directly related to this captain. So from a point of view of success, it was a really successful minefield. But regarding, I suppose, because the British never acknowledged the Audacious, the German government couldn't use it as propaganda, or it was very difficult for them to get propaganda from it. So from their point of view, it failed in what their target was.
So we have
quite harsh, probably from a point of view of the captain of the Berlin, because he done a very good job, but that was the end of his naval career, basically.
So Peter, we want you to come 2 meters to the left. So we captured kind of the what would it be, the port, the left hand side turret gone, and we need to get the other turret in the frame of the laser. So we're going to do that scan again, and we're just going to move 2 meters to our port. So we'll do the exact same line, but the ROV will be 2 meters more to the port. So that's how we build up the scans. Is we do one run, we move 2 meters, we do the exact same run, we move 2 meters, same run, and you do enough of them runs, you get the whole shipwreck.
So turn around 180?
No, your heading is fine. Just left.
Left?
Just to get this gun in there.
You want to go in reverse?
No, you're flying forward. Centered.
That's
And I guess in terms of all these data sets,
So you need to turn 180 with your...
Yep. Turning 180 counterclockwise.
Yeah, go.
No.
the project that funds this is EU Marine Robots, and what that project is we come together as an advanced community in robotics, in the development of robotic systems such as this ROV, in the development of imaging systems such as the laser and camera systems and photogrammetry, and we've developed a community around that, around the robotics, and it's funded through EU Commission, and as part of that, University of Limerick, our partner, it's led out of University of Porto, and it has partners all across Europe with similar infrastructure such as our ROV. And these infrastructures get offered through the EU Marine Robots project to other research agencies such as University of Ulster here. And those other agencies can get access to these equipment and get these equipment onto these sites to be able to do their scientific studies. So that's what this whole project and this whole operation is about, providing access to these sites for these scientists such as Chris. And all of the data sets, all of these laser images, the photogrammetry data sets, even what you're looking at on screen here, we make all of these data sets available through our online. There's an online server, a data server for EU Marine Robots. And all of that data sets, we make that available to other scientists and other researchers, maybe even divers and public interest, that they can get access to the data sets. And they can also use the data sets and analyze it, maybe in a different context. Maybe they're looking at, the degradation of the shipwreck over time in terms of, biological degradation and how these shipwreck sites are progressing over time. Rather than looking at the biohabitat analysis and the biodiversity. So, it's a great project that's been led out of Porto and funded through Commission. So that's my spiel on the funding side there, Barry, eh?
Oh, it has to be done.
So I guess after this scan, guys, we'll probably leave it at that. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to set up some long transects across the shipwreck. So we will hope to go from bow to stern and maybe repeat that, 7-8 times at 2 meter distances. So we'll get quite a good coverage of the shipwreck site itself over the next couple of hours. We leave site then, I think it's 8 o'clock tonight, we leave site and we head back towards Galway. It takes us maybe 2 days to get back towards Galway. So we'll do one more scan and we'll finish up on the YouTube stream. I just say thanks very much for coming on, guys. Your depth of knowledge in this shipwrecks in terms of historical aspects and diving is second to none,
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. And you actually see there on the screen at the moment, just above the arm, is like this little shaft sticking up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's actually one of the cogs basically that were on a rack and pinion system that allowed the turret to spin. And from a diving point of view as well, like the engineering involved in making a turret of that weight spin is quite impressive.
Actually, and the other thing, Jared just reminded me again on the funding side of things, like we're actually here, and the Scottish scientists are here from SAMS as part of an Interreg funded European project called MARPAM, which is Marine Protected Areas Management and Monitoring. And basically, one of the things that we're exploring here is the provision of ecosystem services from shipwrecks as a form of protected area. Now, they're not officially protected from a habitats point of view, but they're de facto refugia, so that they're protecting, providing habitats by accident, right? And we're trying to understand a bit more about how important that might be in the big picture. So that's, again, the work through the Scottish Association of Marine Sciences, Ulster University, through our kind of network here, we led this application with UL and the Marine Institute as the infrastructure request. But I mean, getting access to this infrastructure has been invaluable. We had the laser that we needed to be able to integrate with the UL ROV, and we need the ship to be able to provide a platform to launch. So it's a really complex, multidisciplinary need. None of us can do this kind of science by ourselves. So the community of practice is really valuable, and that people give of their time and expertise to support some of these scientific inquiries is really heartening. And I hope that this is the first step in a continuing legacy of more of this kind of research in future. So thanks very much again there to all of you for dialing in and for sharing the interest in the site and our work.
Thank you very much too. And if you let me to share my personal impressions about your work, I try to summarize in just a short way. So what we saw in this streaming was the passing away of certain wrecks. Your work can show us what these ships look like today. Prior to the technology and infrastructure you use, it was only possible with the help of handmade reconstruction drawing and then underwater photographs based on the divers' efforts. So seeing the said wreckage, however, requires a big imagination so that anyone can imagine what these ships look like once. So if you allow me, I try to share the screen in order to show the only 2-second short film that some of my friends made for this purpose, based on my blueprints of the ship of Gestitia.
Just give me a second there,
kind
Thomas.
of the gesture of farewell, with this we can say goodbye to these wonderful no-sunken ships. And as a summary, as I mentioned before, I think what you do is not only the present, but it is the future as well, because this is the very exact way of the imagery of a very confused wreck sites, like in the case of Gestitia and Audacious also. So guys, thank you again. It was a very interesting experience for me. And now I try to share with you my screen.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, I don't know whether it succeed or not.
I still can't get it here. Skype.
What's that? Let's see what's going on.
And now?
I cannot get it here through. So
Okay. So this is not.
We'll try for another minute, Tomas. Just give us a sec.
Okay. It seems it doesn't work.
Just wait 1 minute.
what's up?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying. Can you try to share again, Thomas?
Okay.
Uh, it seems it doesn't want to. Oh, wait a second. Yeah, I think I have something here. Yeah.
Okay.
I should have.
So,
Just give me a second now to put it through.
Just 2 seconds.
Can you solve that?
Yeah, just give me a second there so I can put it to the live
Okay.
stream. Okay. Give me a second there. Okay, yeah. There we go.
Okay, so you saw the rag drawing what I made in 2019 as a result of our common expedition to Barry on the wreck site of Gestitia. So it is just a clear handmade drawing, and there is no exact details what you make on your computer-assisted technology and infrastructure. So we try to make the puzzle on the basis of our own eyes. So this is a very very basic way on which we try to visualize the wreck site now. So this is the handmade basis, and so on and so forth. And this is the short film or short movie, as I mentioned, as a say goodbye to this Gestitia. I think together with your work and very impressive result of your work, this kind of computer-assisted imagery is a very useful way to make a comparison between the presence of the wrecks and the original shape of the ships. So we can combine together as researcher in order to make a great publicity to the history of these certain ships. So I think it is a very, very useful way, and what you do is a very important tool for this. So thank you very much. It is, I think, it is a very interesting experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. That was a really interesting clip.
What's your final words?
Okay, we'll leave it at that, guys, and we'll put up this broadcast. I think we have a recording of it, so we can share that around. Anyway, I think it was a really good talk, and it's really fascinating what we can achieve as a collaboration together in all this, eh?
Exactly. No, thank you, Jared, for putting it together.
And I wish you good luck with all your expeditions this summer, Barry, eh? When you return to all these shipwreck sites.
Hopefully from June onwards we can get back up there and get 5 or 6 weeks done. So all going well.
Exactly. Okay, we'll end it there. Thanks again, Tomas, and thank you, Barry, and thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Thank you. Have a
really
good
excellent.
weekend to you.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye bye.